the 21st century mystery temple. A place where the church is a tool for human development, human growth and evolution, the recovery of black people's humanity and dignity, and a power center for black self-determination. We're doing it in every city that we're in, and we're going to do it in every city we're going to go to in order to facilitate the consciousness raising of black people. Our goal, simply said, is to restore our people to our original place of power and dignity in the world. Amen. Amen. Let the congregation say amen. I want to talk today about memorializing our ancestors. Memorializing our ancestors. Our scripture is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 15, chapter 5, verse 15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. We come to the Memorial Day weekend as become the unofficial beginning of summer. Memorial Day is about memory. It's about remembering those people and things that define who we are and what we stand for. And some form of Memorial Day exists in all cultures, because our collective memory is what defines us as a people. In the Bible, Israel is often commanded to commemorate certain people, certain events, to remind them of who they are and whose they are, of the things, circumstances, and events that have occurred in their long journey with God. They're asked, commanded, to remember these things, to bring them back up year after year, to remember them because they define who they are. In Moses' last instruction to Israel on the plains of Moab before entering the promised land, he told them, always remember that you were slaves in Egypt. He wanted their memory of their shared history, their shared challenges, their shared experiences, and ultimately their shared destiny, to hold them together by reminding them who they were and from whence they came. And these remembrances were important because they define them as a people. In our culture, too, we have these remembrances. American Memorial Day is one of these. And this serves the same purpose in our own society. It's celebrated as a day in which we are encouraged to remember all those soldiers who died in battle serving in American wars. But it's also a little known fact of history that Memorial Day began as Decoration Day on May 1st, 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina. Their newly freed slaves organized a ceremony to memorialize the Union soldiers that had died at a local prisoner of war camp there in Charleston. The hundreds of soldiers that died there during the war were hastily and disrespectfully buried in shallow, unmarked graves. The area they were buried in was overgrown and unkept. So on May 1st, 1865, 10,000 newly freed black people gathered after church. They cleaned up the area and landscaped the burial grounds. They built an enclosure and an arch that honored the fallen soldiers as martyrs of freedom. 3,000 school children carried bouquets of flowers. They brought flowers to be laid on the burial field. The historian David W. Blight described the day. He said, this was the first Memorial Day. African Americans invented Memorial Day in Charleston, South Carolina. What you have here is black Americans recently freed from slavery, announcing to the world with their flowers, their feet, and their songs what the war had been all about. What they were creating was the Independence Day of a second American Revolution. Now, this is probably the first time in American history that black people had something to memorialize, to celebrate, something to remember. And this commemoration did not really fit the narrative that the people of the South wanted. So they suppressed the memory of this day. The memory of this day was a legend among black people who told each other about it from generation to generation by oral tradition. But there was nothing in history to substantiate that it ever happened, and anytime anybody ever brought it up, they said, no, you must be mistaken, that never happened. The first Memorial Day was in Massachusetts somewhere. It was necessary to make it seem like it never happened, because your society has days of remembrances which reinforces its narrative, not yours. So soon, this commemoration was co-opted and stolen from grateful black people and was transformed into a salute to American military might. But this was not black people celebrating American military might. It was celebrating their liberation and the gratitude they felt for those that had died in that war. What I want to do today is emphasize the importance of memory and encourage us to remember our forgotten ancestors who endured 20 generations of hell to keep us alive and make our present opportunities possible. Like I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned time and time again, we really have no holidays where we are commemorating black people of significance. How are you going to have a people? How are you going to have pride if you don't have any days of remembrances to reinforce who you are, define who we are as a people? That cause us to look back over our journey and to recognize we have been in this thing together all this time. How is it that after 400 years we have no commemorances, any holidays where we are celebrating us? Take, for example, Malcolm X's birthday was last Sunday, but there were no parades. There was no notice on TV. Matter of fact, I was on Malcolm X Boulevard in New York last Sunday, and it wasn't anything going on. Marcus Garvey's birthday is in August 17th. But August 17th is going to go by. It's just another day on the calendar. People are not going to go out of their way to remember Marcus Garvey, to commemorate his contributions. We have many venerated ancestors that are worthy of celebration, but none of them are commemorated with appropriate memorials. The possible exception is Martin Luther King, but that's only because America has co-opted and redefined his memory. They turned him into the mildest possible version of what he actually was. The subject of memory is especially important in 2019 because this is our quad-centennial year. The first enslaved people came to America in 1619. It has been 400 years since black people first docked on these shores in late August of 1619. And it's important to remember that we have been here since the beginning, laying the foundations of this country and providing the wealth that made possible everything that it's become. It's important to remember, and to tell our children who are told that they are less than, that they are second class, that they're on the back burner, that they are not important. It's important to remember that whatever this has become, it's become because of us. We're talking about memory, why memory is important. How is it that for 400 years we could be here, we don't have a holiday? No day that we go out of our way to remember something that happened to us. Juneteenth is next month. And it goes by hardly without a peep. Without these anchor remembrances, our identity as a people is shaky. We're talking about memory. And last week I was in New York attending my oldest grandchild's rites of passage ceremony. And I was reminded in a personal and powerful way how important memory is. Inspired by her experience at the Bueland Summer Camp last year, she said, this is what I'm missing in my life. I go to a fancy prep school where I'm on the outside looking in. And this is what I'm missing, this fellowship, these things we learn, these things about my people that we learn, the activities that we engaged in, the worship service that we attended together. This is what I'm missing. So when she got back to New York, she found the Blue Nile Rites of Passage program, which was founded 25 years ago by people who are actually related to the shrine. Dr. Ben, John Henry Clark, Marimba Ani, James Smalls, and Francis Cress Welsing. They put together this program in 1994 in order to take children through the experience of becoming black conscious adults. And it's based on when you come to the age of consciousness, that we become a teenager. You're supposed to decide what kind of person you're going to be. And that's what the program was designed to do. And it wasn't purely ceremonial. It actually put children through rigor, tough rigor, for 9 months. My granddaughter, 15 years old, got up at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning to travel from Brooklyn to Harlem, which is like going from Sunnyside to Acres Home, on public transportation, by herself. She had to study black history, black culture, go through a process of sisterhood socialization, which is kind of like our group process, pass the personal scrutiny of her appointed mentor, research her own family history, and memorize the names and stories of her descendants as far as she could go back. She ended up being only one of 7 girls who passed through to reach womanhood in the Blue Nile class of 2019. But what I found to be even more impressive was the personality transformation that took place in her over that 9 months. Today she is she's more consciously black. She's more confident. She's more self-assured, more determined, more mature, more serious. She has a greater sense of purpose and direction in her life. And she has a deep memory and appreciation of her own people and what they've gone through. That's right. She was transformed by memory. She just stood up and did something I couldn't do. When she started naming her relatives on both sides of her family and going back generations and telling their stories, I was overcome because it helped remind me of who I am. And it gave me hope for what we could be in the future. Apparently in New York, this is a big deal because her mother, my daughter, she's a lawyer. And she was in court, and before the trial commenced, the judge said, "Congratulations, Miss Nelson." And then she said, "What, did I win the case? What happened?" And she said, "Your daughter went through Blue Nile Rites of Passage, didn't she?" And she said, "Yeah." Wondering how did she know? And the judge said, "Those who know, know." Black people normally do not receive this kind of affirmation and transformation because we are separated from our memory. Malcolm X says history is the memory of a people. And the people without the history is like a tree without roots, dead. Alex Haley said the most transformative moment in his life was on September 29th, 1967, in Annapolis, Maryland, where he stood at the spot that his ancestors first came to America. He said from that day forward, he was a different person. He named the book Roots because he said that knowledge gave him roots that he didn't have before. It made him a different kind of person because the way he looked at the world changed. His sense of his right to be here changed. He was rooted. We're talking about memory. In traditional African worldview, memory was all important. In the African worldview, everything was based on memory. In their view, the things we're doing today grew out of the past, which have led us to this place. This knowledge is symbolized by the Sankofa bird. Everything is connected to the past, and we are simply carrying out a process that was initiated by people that came before us. Our African ancestors believed that there's only one life force or vital energy in the universe, and that is God, the supreme force. And since this vital energy could not be created or destroyed, it's reincarnated into new incarnations, generation after generation. It's the same life. It's just in different bodies. They conceived of God as the great ancestor. Ain't that something? Think of God as your ancestor. God is the great ancestor, the source. The source of the life that I have comes from the great ancestor. In other words, God created us and we are simply handing down the same life force energy from person to person, descendant to descendant, generation after generation. In traditional African society, every child had to learn the names of their ancestors going back to 13 generations. They believed that newborn babies were the reincarnation of dearly departed ancestors. And that's why they recycled names based on who the new baby reminded them of. This meant that you grew up believing that I am my ancestors. They are living through me. They believed that their lives and circumstances had not only been shaped by their ancestors, but their ancestors still participated in their daily lives, guiding them, warning them, helping them, chastising them. They believed the ancestors cried with them in their failures and celebrated with them in their victories. The ancestors had a chair at every table, a plate at every meal, a room in every house. They danced at every party and were consulted for every major decision. In the African understanding, family and community consisted not just of the living, but also by a great cloud of witnesses, the invisible fellowship of ancestors. If you think about that and being in that worldview and that's the way you conceive of things, then it becomes easy to realize the kind of psychological trauma that would be caused by coming from a worldview built on memory and immersed in a slavery where you were stripped of memory. The stripping of every shred of memory and ancestry was part of a process called animalization, reducing human beings to domesticated animals. Because this memory made you human. It made you be concerned with more than just yourself. It made you concerned with principles and what other people thought of you and how you lived your life and what you did. There were certain things you wouldn't do, certain things you would not subject yourself to if you were connected to those that had come before you. But if you could be stripped of all that, you become just like a horse or a dog who has no knowledge of those that came before and can be treated any kind of way. With each passing generation being further removed from Africa, black people were born, lived, and died with no real knowledge of those that had come before. Black people's history was intentionally erased. Our oppressor wanted to make it seem as if black people had no past, and that our enslavement, animalization, and exploitation was justified. It was as if black people were test tube babies born on a slave ship. Not only were we separated from any sense of our ancestors, but we were regularly separated from existing family, destroying the family continuity between the generations. Even the people we knew our family, we were separated from them. In Slavery and the Making of America, it says, economic benefit always outweighed consideration of family ties for slave owners. This was strictly business. Because of the high premium placed on male labor throughout every period of American slavery, black men were the most likely to be parted from their families. For slave owners who considered the basic family unit to be comprised of mother and child, husbands and fathers could be easily replaced. Many a slave woman was assigned a new husband by her master. Male children were also frequently taken from their mothers. The bond between a slave mother and her daughter was the least likely to be disturbed through sale. Yet this tie was also fragile. Owners could reap large returns by selling pretty girls, especially light-skinned ones, into prostitution or concubinage. For a girl in slavery, being born pretty was a curse. Family separation destroyed generational continuity and created a mentality isolation where enslaved people were rootless and dangling, undirected by the past and feeling no obligation to the future. They learned to care about nobody but themselves. The pain of separation has made us conclude that being joined together with people is a weakness, a disadvantage. And the erasure of kinship bonds and living a life with no knowledge of ancestry stripped life of meaning and purpose and made us easier to control. We're still talking about memory and the power of memory. As a result of 250 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, black people were not only stripped of their past, but we decided something consciously. We decided to forget. We consciously decided not to tell the nightmarish stories of our experience to succeeding generations of children because we feared it would poison their hearts and sabotage their journey toward the American dream. It would ruin them for integration. But that decision also contributed to the destruction of our collective memory. A lot of it we'll never put back together. It's gone forever. Without a memory, our sense of identity and connection to past generations was weakened. We forgot our ancestors. We forgot their names. We forgot their stories. Maya Angelou said, because we have forgotten our ancestors, our children no longer give us honor. Because we have lost the path our ancestors cleared, our children cannot find their way. Because we abandon the path of our ancestors, our children cannot pray. We're still talking about memory. So we uniquely among all the people on earth don't feel we belong to anything bigger than and more important than ourselves. Most of our children have no real knowledge or appreciation of the people that came before them. They call this condition cultural amnesia, not knowing who you are. It's like anybody else with amnesia. You don't know who you are. You don't know where you've been, what you've done. You don't know your name. You don't know who you are. Cultural amnesia means we don't know who we are as a people. Cultural amnesia creates niggas. Cultural amnesia creates people who lack the consciousness to act in unity. Cultural amnesia creates people who hate you because they hate themselves. Cultural amnesia creates people who see your life as having no value because they see their own life as having no value. And if we're not raising our children connected to a collective memory, then we're raising slaves to operate in a slave system. In other words, if you're not careful, you'll be raising a little black white nationalist. You ain't got to be white to be a white nationalist. I hear black white nationalists on the radio all day long. Without a collective memory, we lack consciousness. The consciousness necessary to think and act like a people. Consciousness is the we feeling. The we feeling. It identifies us as a we. These are mine. It's the we feeling that binds people together in unity. Black people collectively have everything we need to thrive and prosper in the world, but we need consciousness to bring us together. Without consciousness, we don't have long-term plans and definite policies that guide our everyday actions. Without consciousness, we don't support leaders and organizations so they can work on our behalf every day, 365 days a year. Without consciousness, there is no accountability, no consequences for what someone does to black people. You can do anything to us because it will take consciousness for us to respond intelligently. Snatch that one out, shoot that one there. It can be on camera, it doesn't matter. They ain't gonna do nothing because they don't have any consciousness. Black people in America constitute the largest economy in the world, the 12th largest economy in the world, with $1.5 trillion passing through our hands every year, which is about the same amount of money that Russia deals with every year. But without consciousness, we have nothing to show for it. We just giving transfer payments to white folks. Without consciousness, we don't respond intelligently and effectively to the glaring and obvious threats looming over our collective welfare. This is a very dangerous time. In many ways, these times are more tumultuous than the civil rights era. See, because white people have always been confident in their whiteness, that we were never really any kind of threat. They ain't so confident today. So a white nationalist movement is growing around the world. Over the last 400 years, white people have built their whole sense of value, worth, and self-esteem on being white. You ain't white, so you don't understand it. White people derive a sense of superiority and confidence and self-assuredness because they're white. The anchor of their self-esteem is in their whiteness. So much so that today the most valuable property that they possess is not money or land or children. It is their whiteness. Whiteness comes before country, and whiteness comes before God. Now that their whiteness is perceived as being threatened, they're losing their mind. They are threatened by the browning of America. The great demographic changes sweeping across the country as the number of people of color continue to grow larger and larger. They know that by 2050, they will be a minority in their own country. This don't bother you. But when you live in one of these little small towns where you ain't seen a black person since last Easter, the idea that, wait a minute, I'm gonna be a minority? This is very disturbing. All the things you're looking at on the news and stuff is coming from this profound sense of insecurity that the world is changing. Already, there are more children of color in public school in America than there are white children. And they said, what does the future hold? They're going to get in charge and treat us the way we treat them. They are threatened, so they're running around, got people talking about white genocide. It's an idea that through a number of different things, they're being wiped out, and that is true. It's true. Nobody's actively doing it, but it's true. Because the white gene is recessive and the color gene is dominant. And wherever the white gene and the color gene come together, that's the end of whiteness. So you can't have all these Mexicans coming up in here. They wiping us out. You got to reverse Roe versus Wade. And we got to go back to having babies.
That's what that's about.
Repopulate this white nation into a white nation again. They got white genocide. And it's real. But no, it's not like the Nazis are taking people out and shooting them.
Right.
Their numbers are being reduced by biology. Then they got the white genocide, and they got the great replacement theory. This is the one to come out of Europe. That the Jews are conducting a campaign where people of color replace white males in society. When you heard people down in Charlottesville saying the Jews will not replace us, that's what it was. That's the great replacement theory. It's what they believe. You say it's ridiculous, it's silly. But they believe it. And they're willing to fight and die over it. They got all kind of secret websites that you can go to. You will never run into them. You'll be on the internet all day, you won't run into them, you don't know where to go. They got back channel websites they go to where they communicate all this stuff every day and driving each other crazy. They got ghost town poverty in small towns all over America. The little town is turned into a ghost town. And the white people there are addicted to opioids, become the #1 cause of death in the country. They are not confident, and insecure white people are dangerous. So these are dangerous times for us. And we sit around living, chilling, as if nothing is wrong. These are dangerous times. White people have abandoned all principle and gone tribal, banding together around the sacredness of whiteness because they feel threatened. Recently, a survey revealed that almost 80% of Americans believe that Donald Trump is a criminal. 80%. People don't believe 80% of nothing.
Right.
Yet they continue to support him and his policies because they feel threatened. And you got to put yourself in their shoes. If you had a crook who was your leader, but was doing all the stuff that you wanted done,
Right.
would you stop him? You go at the dinner table and say, you know that man is crazy, but he's doing what we need to have done.
Right. Okay, how you get done.
So no amount of outrage or pointing out the facts is going to change the fact that these threatened and insecure people got a champion.
That's right.
And they support their champion.
Right.
Insecure white people are dangerous. And mark my words, it's going to get worse. You remember you heard it from me. It's going to get worse. There's going to be more white nationalism. There's going to be more white terrorism. There are going to be more school shootings, and there are going to be more school segregation, and more voter suppression, and more efforts to stack the courts with conservative judges, more egregious policies affecting black people, and more police shootings of unarmed black people, like the one that happened in Baytown a couple weeks ago, where on camera a woman is on the ground saying she's pregnant, and a police officer shot her 4 times and killed her. I look out there, I don't see no outrage. We got radio outrage, internet outrage. Don't nobody care about that. They don't do anything to anybody. There are no consequences to that. That man has shot that woman on camera, and everybody knows his name and where he is. But people without consciousness not going to do anything about it. When we say we live in an enemy system, we have to understand what that means. We are always under attack. We are constantly at risk. Somebody is always working against our interests. The conditions we face are deliberate and intentional. It ain't no mistake. I can go point it out and they'll go correct it. It's deliberate and it's intentional. And it's not going to stop until we remember who we are and learn to act intelligently in our own collective interests every day. Every day. Every day. The process of remembering who we are and learning to act in our own interests starts with memorializing our ancestors and getting our memory back. Moses told Israel, always remember you were slaves in Egypt. Yeah, and why would you say that to people going there marching in the promised land? Why would you tell them that?
Come on, say it.
He said, always remember. That's where you were forged and fashioned.
Come on.
That is the gauntlet you came through. Always remember you were slaves in Egypt. He wanted them to remember today all they went through for generations. And we need to remember too. Throughout the history of America, black people have been victims of a system of total exploitation. Black people in America have never been treated as people. From the very beginning, black people have been regarded as raw material, a natural resource, like coal or oil or natural gas or trees. We were the resource to be plundered, raped, and exploited to yield the greatest benefit to white society. That was our only reason for being. Y'all remember that woman, Henrietta Lacks? The one whose cancer cells were used. She died of cervical cancer, and they used her cells to treat cancer, to treat AIDS. 11,000 patents were made from her cells. People all over the world got an extended life because of her. And her family didn't get not one single solitary dime. Because black people are a resource to be plundered, to be exploited, like fuel. We make the thing go. Plantations were actually slave labor camps for the production of cotton. And black people were the equipment. Nobody has ever given us a damn thing in this country.
Come on, say it.
Nobody ever gave us anything.
That's right.
They didn't give us freedom. We fought for our own freedom.
That's right.
When Social Security was established in 1935, black people didn't get any of it because they exempted farm workers and domestic workers. And that was all us. We was cotton pickers and maids, cooks, taking care of babies. So we were not qualified. We didn't get none of that either. GI Bill came along. We didn't get any of that either. After World War II, everybody went out and got a house, built the suburbs and everything around the cities, went out and built all this. We didn't get any of that because the places that we were building houses were deemed by banks poor risks.
Right.
It was a poor risk. It was a bad investment. So we didn't get any of that. All those farm loans the government gave out and business loans they gave out, we didn't get any of those. Ain't nobody gave us nothing in this country. We should have a completely different attitude. They gave us voting rights in 1865, then took them back. Then gave us voting rights again in 1965, and took them back. They're still trying to figure out how to keep us from voting.
That's right.
You go to the polling, or it moves on the other side of town.
Come on, say the truth.
They're still figuring out. When you do vote, they don't count it. Nobody ever gave us anything. We need to know it. We tell our children, nobody ever gave you nothing. Nobody never gave us nothing. You say, what does that have to do with memory? It has to do with understanding what kind of world you live in and what you're dealing with. Our ancestors went through absolute hell, living in a state-sanctioned program of total exploitation for 20 generations. And yet, here we are. We need to know that we've been doing 400 years designed to take everything from us and leave us dead. But here we are. Here we are. Alive and well and relatively sane. Here we are, celebrating graduations and birthdays and engagements and anniversaries. Here we are, well-fed, well-clothed, and generally well-off. Here we are, with big dreams and big aspirations. Here we are. Who did that? Who made that possible? Was it Jesus? Who made that possible? Who should we be thanking? Our existence is a testament to our ancestors' determination and their sacrifices. And we have to always remember what they did for us. Our ancestors have made possible all that we do and all that we have. We should live our lives in a way that honors them. And we should know that they are still with us. We also need to understand that we will be soon ancestors too. And ancestors are judged by the legacy they leave. The generations are connected in ways far more profound than we may have previously understood. I know you've heard preachers talking about generational curses, but our African ancestors were more focused on generational blessings that we can intentionally build up and hand down. The good things we can hand down to those coming after us. Whatever blessings and benefits and advantages we have in our lives do not come simply by our own efforts. They will pass down to us. I know you can say, well, I was born with nothing. I didn't inherit anything from my people because they didn't have anything. I worked hard to get where I am. So where do you think you got your determination, your grit, your optimism, your faith that you use to make something of yourself? Where do you think it come from? Who should you be thanking for that? Your ancestors developed that fighting through all kinds of hardships for generations. We are the culmination of their efforts. They didn't have the opportunity that you have to actually use these qualities to make dramatic improvements in their lives, but we have an opportunity to use these things that they have built up and handed down to us to make dramatic improvements in ours. They built up their character and handed that down. And that is their legacy. They used their inherited strengths to stay alive and to not lose their minds so they could be handed down to me and you. Our lives are built on past lives. Everything our people went through and how they dealt with it has served to put us further down the road. And it should be our goal to put those coming after us even further down the road. In other words, we are sowing seeds for future generations. Whether you realize it or not, everything you do counts. There's nothing done in secret for which there are not consequences to our posterity. Every time you preserve, you persevere. Every time you overcome. Every time you get up and try again. Every time you show solidarity with your brothers and sisters. Every time you exhibit compassion. Every time you stand up for what's right and offer service to those in need, you are storing up equity in your generational account and handing a legacy down to the people coming after you. It's easy to think, I'm not a leader, I'm just a city employee, a grandmother, a businessman, a housewife, or I'm just a single mom raising my kids and going to work. I'm not going to do anything great. It's too late for me. You've got to think more generationally like our African ancestors, like them that were picking cotton all day long. I'm living for something. I'm living for something that's coming. And I'm not even going to see it, but I'm living for something, and I know it's coming. We got to think more generationally. The fact that you're a good parent, a principled person, faithful to your spouse, loyal to your family and friends, doing your part to improve your community and working to be your best self, you're sowing seeds for the people that are coming after you. You may not see it happen in your lifetime, but you may be sowing a seed for a child or a grandchild or a great-grandchild or a great-great-grandchild to do something great in the future. And it doesn't even have to be a blood relative. People become a part of your legacy because you hand something down into their life which makes them better people. All of our ancestors ain't our relatives. It's all those people who have become an example and a shining light for us. It could be just some kindred spirit that God has brought across your path. A kindred spirit. Reminds me of a story I read. A black man named John Utendahl, who is currently the vice chairman of Bank of America. A black man. Gave a commencement address at Columbia University in 1994. And while he was up there giving that commencement address, he was looking out into a sea of white faces. And as he looked out in that sea, he saw one black engineering student. And he doesn't know why, but he searched out and found that student and made an appointment to have lunch with him. And they talked about this student's future over some tuna fish sandwiches. He said, I'm an engineer. I'm going to be an engineer. I went to engineering school. And John Utendahl talked this man into not going into engineering, but going into investment banking. He became his mentor. He got him a job at Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. He guided him to become very successful. That young man eventually broke away from Goldman Sachs to form his own company. His company became one of the most successful technology management companies in the world. This past week, that young man gave a commencement address at Morehouse College. His name is Robert F. Smith. He has become the richest black person in America, worth more than $6 billion. In his address, he said, on behalf of 8 generations of my family who have been in this country, we're going to put some fuel in your bus. This is a challenge to you. This is my class, and my family is making a grant to eliminate their student loans. Now, I know my class will make sure they pay this forward. Let's make sure that every class has the opportunity going forward, because we are enough to take care of our community. Who knows what good blessings will flow to black people because of this generosity? What a legacy to leave. And all the good things all those students do, they become a part of his legacy too. But you got to remember, one man that had it made, John Utendahl, is what pointed him out and set him on that path. Just because John Utendahl paid attention to the prompting of the Holy Spirit when God sent a black person across his path, it made all the difference. The Shrine of the Black Madonna is built on the acknowledgement of the fact that we share a sacred trust between those who have gone before and those who will come after. We are aware that our future will grow out of our sense of connection to our ancestors in the past, our connection to each other in the present, and our descendants in the future. We're in this thing together. We can't give up. We're a relay race that's been going on for generations, and we can't afford to die with the baton in our hand. We have to pass it on, and we have to pass it on in better position than we received it. This is our sacred duty, our blood-bought obligation. We have not endured this ordeal for no reason. What has not killed us has made us stronger. We have been strengthened for some purpose, some critical role in God's plan. We are destined to be restored to our original place of power and dignity in the world. After all we've been through, here we are. Memorial Day ought to be more to us than a day off of work, a day out of school, barbecue and watermelon. We ought to be memorializing our ancestors, Our ancestors are the most unappreciated people in the history of the world. We owe it to ourselves and to those that made a way for us to remember them and to thank them. And insofar as possible, to know their names, to say their names, to know their stories, and to pass them on. Let us celebrate our forgotten and unappreciated ancestors, for they have given us all we have. On our Memorial Day, let us memorialize our ancestors. Amen and Ashe.
Brothers and sisters, we come now to the time where we act upon our practice of self-determination, which sustains the many institutions of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. The Shrines of Detroit, Atlanta, Houston, our cultural centers, the Beulah Land Farms Incorporated, PAOCC Liberia, all were built upon the sacrificial giving that makes cooperative economics more than just an ideal, but a dream realized. Your financial support helps to keep our ministries in every region of the country relevant, transforming, and productive. As you donate today, make your tax-deductible donation by credit, debit, PayPal, direct deposit, or by check to the P.O. Box of your local region. Thank you for your sacrificial giving, which reflects the self-giving of our standard bearer, Jesus the Black Messiah. May God bless you for your tithing gift today, and we thank you for your continued support.